Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining and welcome to Shit to Hit, creating meetings participants love. So let's take this time, these next 18 minutes, and learn how to turn around dead meetings into something your participants know can come into and feel revived, rejuvenated, and get the results they want. Sound good? Okay. Before I move on, though, I want to share with you the story behind this racy title because I don't sit around thinking of titles like these. But I had been working with a client and they had a 50-person status meeting that had not been facilitated. So if you kind of put yourselves in the shoes of those participants, you might have an idea of what they were facing. It was not good, it was not pretty. And after working with me for a while, my client came in and she's like, Elena, our meeting really turned around. You turned our meeting around from shit to hit. I loved our meeting today. And I want it to continue that way. And in honor of that client and in honor of all the people in the world sitting through dead meetings, I titled this Shit to Hit. So let's go on a journey and let's talk about the 3 steps to make us hit meeting. And now, before I start, I want you to know that these 3 steps that I'm going to present can actually be presentations in and of themselves. They involve learning, a set of tools, but for our purposes here, I'm going to talk about all 3 together at a shallower level, just to give you enough information. And I'll share some of the materials that I referenced and I used so that you can go in and learn it yourself as well. So those 3 steps are know yourself, know your team, and know your outcome. Now, first, know yourself. When I was coming together with how do I make this presentation pop? How do I make this work? I have a whole set of facilitation skills and tools that I use and I bring out. And I've been studying flow for several years now. So how do I bring this to you so that you can get the most out of your time? And it was important to me to do something for you, because do something that would easily make you have a killer session with the tools I present. Because when I see someone like John Cutler or Lisa Atkins, and I'm hearing them speak and I learn something and I can immediately apply it and share. Sometimes I'm in a virtual meeting with them and I'm like, da 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 da. Our company's the product. It's not the team. It's not the product. It's the company. I feel really alive and excited, and I really wanted to provide that with you. But everything I was trying, all the steps, just seemed so inauthentic. They weren't working. And I was telling my best friend, Nadia, what's going on here? What can I do to make it work? And she told me, she's like, Elena, it's you. You could give any set of tools and it would only be half effective because it's you who brings the magic. It's you who knows what to do with them. And I realized, well, it's not just me, it's any skilled facilitator. Just like you who are sitting here to learn, you bring the magic. So how do you take a set of tools and bring them to life so that your meeting can come to life and get the results that everybody wants? Well, you've got to know yourself. And when you know yourself, there's something cool that happens. You see that the team won't go any further than you can. So if I've never felt quaking boots and like worried that I'm going to say something and worried if I should say it or not say it or what, but it's so strong that I say it anyways, and it totally shifts the room, that's courage. If I've never felt that before, I can't take you on a journey to courage, to that level of fear and overcoming that fear. So you must be a student of yourself, because they cannot go any further than you. The reason we can see a Brene Brown presentation and feel moved to our core is because that presenter has worked with vulnerability so long, and she's gone to uncharted waters so long that we can feel it and we could go there too. She opens it up. And just like her as a performer. I live in near Hollywood, so Hollywood performers know that your job as a performer, and that's what we are as facilitators when we're taking individuals through a journey and taking them to a new place, is we are performing because we are here to change the molecules in the room. You want to go from shit to hit. You've got to change dead molecules and make them come alive. And you can only do that if you know yourself and you've taken yourself there first. So some ways to make yourself know yourself is to go back and do that humble inquiry of what makes you feel alive. What makes your eyes dance? What did it feel like seeing fireworks for the first time in your life? What brings that spark? Or what was it that gave you the courage to do those crazy things that you've done in the past, or to be vulnerable, or to listen? Know yourself so that way you can bring it forward. Because there's one thing that old clockmakers knew, and this is going to sound random, but I'm going to bring it back together. Don't worry. Old clockmakers knew this one thing, and it was that if you put a bunch of clocks in the room against a wall, what would immediately happen is that the clocks would start synchronizing to one another. Clock, 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 clock. And if you put something really big, like a grandfather clock in the middle of the room, of that wall, everything syncs to the big pendulum. There's a word for that. It's called coherence. And I learned about coherence from Dr. Ellen Watkins, who took the UK rowing team from unremarkable to Olympic medalists. And he says that coherence is that state where elements are in harmony with one another. And it's important for us to know this because human beings have a pendulum, and it's our heart. And I know it sounds so warm and fuzzy to say it, but actually the pure chemical of our heart's throwing off electromagnetic energy every second. And it comes alive through our voice. It comes alive through our body stance. It comes alive through what we're seeing. And if you can control that pendulum and know that you are the big pendulum in the room for everyone to sync up with, then you can use that power to take folks on a journey. And you need to know this because sometimes when you're facilitating, you need to adjust your style. I'll tell you a story. When we came back from winter break, I had spent the whole winter break indulging in holiday cookies. I was really happy. I was indoors. I could bake. There was just too many cookies. I enjoyed them. And I come into a meeting and I'm facing two VPs, one who was almost finished with the whole 30, which is a completely clean meal plan, and another who had spent the whole break doing meditation and yoga and spas. So we're in that meeting and it's slipping from me. There's nothing I can do to facilitate. And what's happening? It's because my heart was so full of sugar and carbs. I couldn't be the strongest heart in the room. So I had to adjust my style. I actually had to stand up so that way I could take control of the room. Because otherwise I would have been like, please, trying to get in there. And we all know how that feels. It's kind of miserable to try to get into a room where you're not the biggest pendulum in the room. So you do this because you're actually going to take your team on a journey. And really, when folks are coming into a meeting, they want to come out with an outcome that they couldn't have done by themselves, that they couldn't have gotten to otherwise without being in that session. And what you want to trigger through yourself is something called the flow state. And I'm going to say flow is that one state where you're in the pocket, you're in the zone, and ideas come rushing to you. The best creative answers just emerge from your body. You just make connections that you couldn't have made. And that cycle is actually well documented, well researched for the last 50 years. And it has 4 stages. It doesn't just magically happen, although it feels like it. But there's actually things that are happening in our bodies. And the first stage is struggle. To get us to that flow state, we have to struggle. We have to have something that's a little bit challenging, not so challenging that it's going to cause us anxiety, but it has to be challenging so that we can build up our cortisol and norepinephrine so we could have a charge against it because it's a challenge. So it could bring us up. And at some point, the science shows that at some point you're working on this challenge, you're struggling. It's like, oh, I'm never going to get it. And then you have this aha moment. You make a realization. And that realization moves you into the second phase of the flow cycle. And that is your release phase. That's when nitric oxide, not nitrous oxide, that's a whole different experience. But that's when nitric oxide floods your system and allows that cortisol to fade away and gets you set up to go into the next stage, which is the juicy stage. And that's called flow. And that flow stage is where you're getting this cocktail of really good feel-good chemicals like dopamine and endorphins, and this one chemical called anandamide. And that's called your bliss chemical. That's why when you're in the zone, it feels so good because your body's actually producing bliss. It's producing the chemicals. And this stage, your brain waves, the brain waves that are flowing are theta and gamma brain waves, and they are so expensive. You are doing such high computation at this stage that it turns off parts of your brain so that you can do this computation. And the parts of the brain that it turns off is your frontal lobe, and not all the frontal lobe, but it takes away your sense of self, your sense of time, so that way you could do these computations. And that's why this magic happens in that phase. But what's happening is that it's actually very expensive for your body to be in flow. That's why we can't always be in it. That's why it turns off those parts of your brain. And we need to recover. We need to downregulate and recover after flow. And that's going to allow our brain, our nervous system to reset, our brain to just calm down and get ready for another flow cycle. But if you're in this room, my guess is you're not very good at self-care and recovery because there's so much like drive. That's kind of why you're here, right? You want to get better. And that's my guess. I may be wrong, but I'm guessing you want to get better. And we don't give ourselves a chance to recover. But that's so important for us to get back in flow and for us to spend more time in flow. And here I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to be really sad. It was really sad for me, but I'm going to tell you something that will make it easier for you to get in flow. And if you're in flow, you can lead your teams in flow. And that's this. TV is not recovery. Television viewing is actually high gamma, which means your body is in flow when you're watching television. It feels so good to watch a good show, but your body is expending a lot of energy. That's why when you Netflix binge a whole season of Cobra Kai, you feel so exhausted afterwards. It's because even if your body's not working, your brain is working. So what are some ways of recovery? Well, ways of recovery, you can look at massage, you could take an Epsom salt bath, meditation, uplifting conversation, and queen bee of them all is a walk in nature. That will help downregulate your system and get back to normal and recover from the hangover of flow. So now we covered that know yourself. We're going to move a little bit faster because we're going to talk about knowing your team. That's the second step. Now, in my book, Invisible Leader, I write about how to interview your team before a big session. So that way you know what's alive on the team. You have to get a pulse. I'm not going to repeat any of those here. You could go get my book. It's under $20. It'll give you some sample questions. But what I am going to do is I'm going to share with you some of the quotes that I've seen. And I want you to listen to this because these are not atypical. The first one is, I feel we are holding off the fort until the cavalry arrives. Now the cavalry is forming and coming to our aid. I would like the confidence that the cavalry turns up with their guns and their horses working and they don't show up late. Or how about, I'm struggling with believing there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And then this one, the team is really working, but stakeholders don't see it that way. putting in your all and it's not good enough, the team is discouraged. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is that these are just a sampling of what I get in my interviews. And it, it goes in line with the fact that 85% of the workforce is disengaged worldwide. And it's only going up, that disengagement, with COVID. I don't know what the latest numbers are. Knowing where your team's at gives you the starting line, and it also humbles you, because if you think that your team feeling discouraged, you can go in and flip a meeting like that, that's actually disrespectful. And you want to meet them where they're at, you have to know where they're at. Because the next step is know your outcome. Knowing your outcome allows you to have your finish line. And Stephen Kotler, who a lot of this flow research is his, he says our brain is really resourceful. If we know the starting line and we know the end, the brain will fill in the rest. But one thing that's important is that flow follows focus. And as a facilitator, you're helping the team stay focused. You know that they're going to go on rabbit holes. They're going to want to do something else, but you keep them in focus. You allow them to struggle in that focus and something that's challenging, and you bring them back so that they as a group will go through that flow cycle. Because once you hit your outcome, you want to celebrate that win. There is so much good in celebration. And I don't think I need to stress that part. But when you celebrate your win, you're actually, again, releasing dopamine. You're creating the chemicals that people go pay money on illegal drugs for. So let them celebrate the win with you. And not only that, there's this halo effect where you teach teams to celebrate, is that they see you and you become the celebration person. And it's slightly manipulative, but that's what life is. I mean, we're all manipulators for whatever reason. But then they see you and they go back into that state. And it's a good thing. It's good for them to go into the state of celebration, to know. I've had teams where I had to pull out things that they accomplished because 3 months ago they were facing problems that they had spent years with. And after 3 months, they resolved the problem, but it was like no big deal because all of a sudden they're in a new place and they have new challenges. So I have to show them, this is where you went. And in showing them, they can actually have that celebration and remember what they've done. It allows them to recover from all that hard work. So now, I said I wanted a foolproof set of steps. I don't quite have that, but what I am going to give you at the end of this deck is the set of flow triggers. These were created by Mihail Csikszentmihalyi and Steve Kotler and Keith Sawyer. Help you get better meetings. Thank you.